Hello. We'll be starting in just a second here. Okay. I think for the most part I'm just going to run with it as it is. It is a little bit more, not haphazard, but the organization of this one is going to be a little bit different than usual. It's been both a while since I did the last one and is in a newer format. At some point I'd like to make announcements for these ones for people who are subs to see if they're interested in seeing the live version of it, but for now I decided to just run with it. Just gonna plug in one thing here. I guess I gotta share my other portion. Alright. Well. I guess we'll get started then. So, welcome. This is the Silver Seminar. So if you're someone who's tuning in and you've only seen my YouTube content, I basically do this every so often, and it becomes the YouTube content in a sense. So a lot of the stuff that I record or basically put into video format, this is the origin. They get edited later and they get put together. So today we're going to talk about two different topics. We're going to talk about Neutral, so Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Neutral. I guess I should say that in the title. Yeah, put that in the game. Okay, there we go. So we're going to be talking about Neutral as one aspect. Neutral is a very difficult concept to put into words. It's always considered very abstract, difficult to sort of figure out what you want to do at each time point. However, as it is with a lot of different things, you can break it down into a more simplistic interpretation so that it is easier to handle, easier to get a grasp of what you should be doing, what you need to look out for versus your opponent, let's say, how you need to position yourself, what you need to be going for, how that all changes based off of the context, right? So to start off, maybe the bigger portion that we should sort of consider about neutral is when we think about what it is, maybe its goal might be a little bit more helpful. Let me make a quick adjustment to this actually. Actually, I put a question mark. Okay. If I go like this, and boom. Okay. It's easier if we consider the concept in terms of its goal. So, when we think about neutral, why do we want to win neutral? We can recognize that neutral is a state of play, and to me, there's basically three main states. There's neutral, advantage, and disadvantage. We want to win neutral because it places us in advantage. So if we do that, we're in an advantageous position. We're basically able to, say, rack up damage. If we take it all the way through, ideally we would take a stock as well. So it's a very beneficial situation for us. It's a lot harder for the opponent to do damage to us when we're in the middle of comboing them, or we're in a position where it's just very well spaced, put in our favor, let's say. Versus when we lose neutral, we get placed into disadvantage. So we basically will be put in a spot where we're more likely to take damage ourselves. The opponent can dish more damage out to us, and we could lose our stock in the process. So maybe not the most ideal, but ultimately that is sort of what we have to deal with, right? So that at least gives a better concept as to what neutral is, or what the goal is. So the goal is to create advantage. So how does that play out? I like to think of it like a seesaw. So we'll have to see if I end up making like a little graphic or whatnot for this at some point. But you can think about it in terms of, yeah, just a seesaw, and trying to think about one side rising versus the other one falling. You know, you can think of a weigh scale in a similar sense. But basically, in order for it to change from neutral, which is level, or at rest, rising or falling, you're going to have to do, you have to put someone in advantage or disadvantage. So the field kind of tilts in favor of one person or another. So after that, when we think about neutral, we think about how we want to try and get better at it. How do we make neutral wins worth it, right? What are the best ways that we can play out neutral so that we win it as often as possible, right? And also get a lot out of it. Because you can win neutral a lot, but if you don't get much for it, then, or for example, if because you aren't getting much for it, you can't secure stocks, the opponent can catch up to you very quickly. So to me, combos are key to this. They're the most reliable source of damage. They're basically what make it possible for you to hit combo starters. Or basically, not big combo. Your task in neutral is to make it possible to hit combo starters. They make it possible so that you can go through the full combo route and you can rack up damage and, if not take the stock from it, at least bring you quite a bit closer. A lot closer than just a straight aerial or a throw on its own, right? Something that will rack up a few hits in a row at least. This question may be addressed later, but how do you decide when to get a hit you know will hit, or trying to hit specific moves? For example, the combo starters. The slides look nice. Yeah, I tried my best to organize them nice and kind of trim them up a little bit. So let's see. How do you decide when to get a hit you know will hit? Yeah, it does depend on the purpose. It depends on the context as well. So I mean, ultimately, when we're trying to play out neutral, we won't always be doing just combo starters. So the one big flaw in only going for combo starters is it's very obvious, right? It basically becomes predictable, and the opponent can see what we might need to get in order to really, I guess, flourish. So there's more to it than just that on its own. And what becomes important for that is to figure out what neutral tools do for you. So your question will be partly addressed in a little bit, I guess. I'll show you it a little bit more when it's coming through, but it's based off of the context and on whether or not you're in a good position to try and go for what you're trying to do, right? So if you think that something is going to connect, or you have a good chance of it connecting, you might follow through with it. So for neutral, you want to figure out what your neutral tools do for you. To give you three basic functions that they could do. They could start a combo, they could do damage safely, they can threaten space. So for starting a combo, for a lot of characters, this will be something like a grab, maybe it can be like a tilt, maybe a falling aerial. It could be lots of different things that start a combo. Ultimately, another sort of downside for some people in neutral is that this aspect is a little bit tricky for their character's moveset. Sometimes the character doesn't really have an overly strong combo game, and that's why it's important to take advantage of other aspects and other functions that your kit can do. So, for example, number 2, they can do damage safely. These moves, their purpose is that they're low risk. They're not intended to put you into too much danger, because a lot of times when we try to do aerials, or if we try to do tilts, we have to start closing the distance a bit more against the opponent, and we put ourselves within their range as well too. If we could simply just stay entirely out of the opponent's range while still getting all of the benefits of being close up, benefits of our kit, I'd say, then we would just do that. But it's not as simple as that. We lose out on a lot by getting separation, but partially works to our benefit too, because then we're not just getting blown up for existing, right? So when something is set to do damage safely, I usually think about stuff like projectiles. That's a good example. They're the most disjointed thing in the game per se, because they get released and sent out. After that, what comes things like sword hitboxes, so disjointed moves. Basically moves that are not connected to the hurt box, so they actually have situations where if both a character's hitbox and the opponent's hitbox come into contact, there's no risk for the person with the disjoint to get damaged, unless it starts touching their own hurt box. And so sometimes you can use this to effectively put on pressure without actually being too risky about it. You wish Aegis had a good neutral. Yes, if only. If only she did. Or if only they did, I guess. And lastly, for threatening space, this is something that might be a little bit easier to show in game per se. But threatening space basically means that you might not necessarily have to hit someone directly. You can hear this from other Smash players as well, other people who do coaching or whatnot. So I'm not unique in providing this option or this idea. I like to refer to them usually as coverage. You might hear of undershoot or other sort of things as well. But point being that hitting someone directly is great and all, but ultimately in the game there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going on. So what this means is that, how do I think about it? That's unfortunate. Just a minute here. Guess I should have just to be careful. Just realized that I had some audio things that were causing some background noise without me realizing. So let me just adjust this real quick and then I'll show in the game. Turn this one down. Yeah, so I'm not the only one who's mentioned the idea of not hitting someone directly. In Smash, there's a lot of moving parts, and the problem with that is when you try and figure out where the opponent is going to be based off of where they are now, there can be room for error, right? You basically have to predict a small time span in order to actually have your option be effective, and the context is what helps influence what we choose to do. To make our moves safer, or basically to accomplish the function of covering something, it doesn't necessarily have to hit something, right? Basically, the act of throwing a move out in a particular space, as long as it's of some value or some chance that it actually can happen, there will be a benefit that can be provided to us. So if I just throw out a move here where Marth is nowhere close to me, it's not going to do much of anything, right? But if I throw out a move here per se, then in the chance that something like Marth tries to jump in, maybe tries to dash in, this hits, right? So it's not going to work, or basically it's not free roam anymore for Marth at this point. He definitely can still beat this, right? If he chooses the right option, it's not going to work out. If he tries to make tilt me or positions around the option itself, tries to punish me after the fact, that's also going to help. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about just getting up in their face. If you can cover options like, let's say, a dash in pressure or advantage situations, sometimes we like to cover things like escape options, so sometimes we'll cover stuff like a jump, let's say, right? Being able to call out something like that. Those options help quite a bit because they add a little bit more spacing to your move, and in order for the opponent to actually hit you for these different options, they have to go more out of their way to actually make this happen. In some cases, you can put yourself at a range where even if they held all the way forward towards you, they still couldn't hit you in that time span, right? And so this is another aspect that you can layer into neutral, and that can be quite helpful. And in terms of neutral tools, in terms of neutral tools, a tool can accomplish more than one of these functions. It's not locked to just having to do one of these three, right? You could probably even break down these three things or add more to what the function of a neutral tool is. So when you play neutral, your task, or basically the goal, should be to try and layer it so you have the best chance to get your combo starters and keep people out. That is what you are hoping to do. It's a little bit of offense and defense, right? If you layer your neutral with the options that I talked about earlier and the different purposes, then it should be giving you a decent chance to potentially get your combo starters. Obviously, if you'd like to get your combo starters, a lot of them involve having to get quite close up, or they need a specific setup. And so before you get that option, there's going to be a lot of other play going on. And so, for example, if, let's say, you can get a safe way of putting on some damage, might not necessarily lead to anything substantial, but hey, it brings you a little bit closer to taking their stock, why not go for that sort of option? Or otherwise, if you manage to keep the spacing away and basically cover yourself to make sure that they can't just close in on you, then you can defend a little bit better. And in addition to those sort of aspects, movement plays a big part too, and it makes a big difference. So your drift, your spacing, the stage positioning in which all of this movement is happening, all plays a big factor. I have this concept called the spacing cushion, and the idea of it is it's meant to include the opponent's burst range. Make a quick adjustment to this as well. It's meant to be the opponent's burst range, including dash attack. So in a game sense, I'll show it with pit here, but what would this include? It'd be stuff like, for example, nair, forward air, back air, up air, down air, right? Up smash is in there, shield grab, and dash attack. Basically, all of these options for most characters are usually within a realm that's very difficult to react to. And so we need to be careful of it, especially when we're within range, because we kind of almost have to predict or respect those options. We have to expect that they could just be thrown out at any time. Now, if we just decide that we're always going to respect it, we'd never attack then, right? Or we'd try our best to stay completely out of this range. But ultimately, in order to put on really good pressure, we usually have to get close enough to make a lot of these options possible for our own character's kit, right? Our own tilts or our own aerials. Furthermore, if you can add a little bit more pressure, you might get them to start doubting or hesitating about when to throw out these out of shields. Yo, Ethan. Welcome, welcome. But regardless, it's a tricky balance to try and maintain. You definitely try your best to figure out what's the best way to close in and whatnot. I'm not hosting an arena right now, unfortunately. I'm doing a session on some ways of improving Smash, Smash play. And so basically I'm just walking through some different steps. But unfortunately I'm not going to be doing an arena tonight, or at least not right now. I might do one after everything's all done. Yo, Subi, welcome. Okay. So that's basically a concept of the spacing cushion. It's supposed to be the burst options, and we care about it a lot because most of the options that come into this range, not all of the ones that I mentioned, because a lot of times it depends on the character, how fast their dash attack or their smash attack or their forward air or up B is. But a lot of them will end up being in a range that's unreactable. So it's kind of tricky. Once you're outside of that range, a lot of the times, and again, I should kind of mention that for this particular graphic that I have here, it's intended to be just for Cloud here. So yeah, it depends on the character, the range itself as well too, how far it reaches out. But if you're outside of the opponent's burst range, then the options that they do should be reactable. You should have a chance to at least do something like shield or try to dash away or whatever the case, right? Basically, you'll have a chance to do something about it. And that's the important spacing aspect in neutral, because if you understand what you can't, like the range in which you can't just react versus the range in which you can, then you can get a better idea of when you should or shouldn't be resorting to defensive measures, and exactly how you should try to resort to defensive measures. If I'm chilling here in a position and I'm not really worried about the potential for Meta Knight to hit me from here, do I really need to shield yet, right? If I need to shield once I get a little bit closer, or once Meta Knight gets closer to me, maybe in this range, this might be something where I might not have as much luxury to just sort of try what I want or to try and approach. I might have to be more careful because they could throw something like a dash attack out. If I'm chilling over here, maybe not so much. I might even be able to sort of dash out or whatnot. And if they do commit to an option, I can try and punish it. So the cushion idea or the concept is basically meant to give you a visualization. It's not really something you're meant to be drawing up in your head as you play, but you'll get a feel for the relative range that you can't react. I just want to show it as like a portrayal. If you manage this space well, though, then you can essentially accomplish some very interesting ideas. So learning to attack without attacking and shield without shielding. What does that actually mean? Well, again, I mentioned earlier that if I'm outside of something that's in a reactable range, if I'm outside of an unreactable range, I'm in a spot where it is reactable to me, I may not necessarily need to shield unless I know it is going to become unreactable. And for that to happen in the particular situation I have in front of us, Meta Knight would have to get closer to us first. So I won't need to yet, but it is something that I won't necessarily have to shield because the spacing itself is kind of shielding for me. It's defending for me, right? Whereas if I'm up close, now not so much. I do see your question, Subi. I'll answer it after the explanation, but I saw that you kept that in mind too. So give me just a quick sec, and I'll read it I'll read it afterwards. For attacking without attacking, generally what this involves is usually pressuring by being close to someone physically. I mentioned earlier how someone has to respect when you're very close up. The potential options of things like tilts or rising aerials or whatnot, falling aerials on shield or whatnot, are also very concerning to someone who's trying to defend themselves. And so you can take advantage of that by not actually committing to anything, right? You don't necessarily have to throw something out to make someone understand you're in a position to throw out one of those moves, right? By me getting close to an opponent here, there's a chance I might be doing a tilt. Or if I start dashing towards someone, maybe there's a chance I might do something like a dash grab or dash attack, right? But I might not necessarily need to commit to something that puts me in a lot of end lag, let's say, right? Especially if it's a high risk, high reward sort of option, right? So sometimes pressuring by kind of moving around makes a big difference. How I like to do this a lot is when there's platforms, I'll shark from underneath and I'll just kind of get very close to them. But I won't throw out my nair until I've set up the spacing or the positioning for me to auto-cancel it, for example. So that's just one strat that I use. Okay, let's double check. Let's see this question here. So should the focus for some characters be space around the opponent? Space around the initial range of both characters? I would say that you have to at least keep it in mind to some degree, because you have to be aware of how far that they can actually reach. And you can't entirely play against every character from the sense of staying completely outside of this burst range. You, for example, might have certain characters, let's say Min Min or Mithra, who have extremely long burst ranges, and to give up so much stage space is really risky. So you have to learn how to battle in this space as well too, mostly because you have to find a way to get in yourself. But managing that space, understanding what the distance is, makes a big difference. And yeah, it should play into how your neutral tools are affected, right? So for someone like me as Pit, where the spacing works best is probably somewhere like here for me, because I have pretty good grounded movement. My aerials are slightly disjointed, but not too much. I could space things like backer or whatnot. If I want to get my tilts, I have to get a little bit closer still. So somewhere like here, or otherwise whatnot, I might be able to do like a nair, might be able to grab, which does lead to combos for me. So I definitely want to get grabs if I can, but got to figure out that way to get it first. And yeah, so if you're finding that you're getting opened up very easily, or you're having a difficult time trying to get in on an opponent, the spacing itself plays a big factor. Does that sort of answer your question? And I guess I should... Yeah, you'll keep that in mind. Good to hear. To provide actually a different concept, or like another point that I think other people have troubles with in neutral, is sometimes it feels like the opponent just kind of knows what you're going to do. And sometimes that's affected by the decision making of where you're choosing to do your option. How far away. So I mentioned earlier about unreactable and reactable ranges. So this space in between here, within the spacing cushion, is unreactable. This would be ideally the best place for me to choose my options, because it's going to be harder for the opponent to tell what I'm going to do, right? And exactly when. I could change the timing of it, let's say, or whatnot. If I choose or commit to an option from outside of that range, it's supposed to become more reactable, right? And so in this sense, if I can see my opponent choosing their option from this distance, there's a good chance I can get out of the way before it becomes a problem, right? Or I can intercept it with an option. And so this manifests a lot based off of, like, for example, some characters, like let's say zoners, who are able to set up a wall very easily in front of them. They can block up with their projectiles and whatnot and have their opponents try and come in from above. It makes the path longer and more reactive, right? So it basically gets the opponent in trouble because they try and go around the option. But that's what the zoner wants, in a sense, right? Not to say that you want to just brute force through the projectiles. Not necessarily. It's good to move in the air, because then they have to start challenging that space a little bit or whatnot. But the thing is that if you're leaving the ground means that you're going to try and attack, then it can be pretty predictable, right? So the spacing matters quite a bit too, and figuring out how do you close that space, or how close can you get before you'll start to be unable to adjust to whatever option they're choosing. And yeah, that's basically the spacing cushion. That's the idea. So yeah, it's question time. So any other questions will work here. In neutral, is it better to keep eyes on my opponent most of the time? I think that's what it says, because there's a little heart thing blocking on my YouTube chat. Yes, I would say that it's important to keep eyes on my opponent most of the time. Yeah, I would say that you don't want to focus too much on your own character. There's degrees to which you look at your own character, but if you have to look at it a lot, it probably means that you're trying to keep in control of your character's movement, right? So for kind of within my coaching philosophy, I think it's very important to try and make as much of play natural as possible for you. Make it so that it's effortless. You don't have to think too hard, or you don't have to try too hard to make it happen, right? So your movement and your option choices are the things that should be one of the most natural things for you, because you play the same character and try to accomplish the same things, right? So over time, you want to be very, very good at this. And the better that you get at it, the easier it's going to be to trust yourself and to not really have to pay attention to where you're positioned. But then you need to be able to shift your attention to what the opponent's doing, because that informs your choice for sure, right? It's basically going to help you to help you choose what option you want to do in neutral. So you do want to pay attention to your opponent for sure. But if it's not something that you do right now, or you have trouble sort of not looking at your own character to make sure that you're doing the right thing, it means that there's still a few steps to making your play feel more natural, making that movement feel more natural, right? That's how I would put it. Okay, we have one. Hello, Mr. Nice. Welcome. This might come up later, but how do you start flowcharting for neutral? You just get overwhelmed by all the possible options. So I did refer to some of it a little bit earlier. You might not have seen, but it was pretty limited, so I'm going to go into a little more detail here. How I like to try and base things is to try and figure out what the neutral tools do for me. So give me one quick second. I'm just going to see what Subi said. Like a flowchart, essentially keeping a moving flow of my character, but always know my opponent's more favorite options. I would say flowchart is, to me, sort of like based on the context that this is what you go for. It's basically the solutions to your problems, in a sense. And in neutral, that plays out based off of, let's say, the spacing or the positioning of the opponent. So a lot of times, like, for example, if I'm over here, the decision that I make, which might be something like arrow, let's say, is going to be very different compared to something like over here, where I might be able to get something like a grab, right? If I choose to do an arrow from this position, well, if I miss my arrow, it might be quite a bit laggier. Like, it might be a very dangerous option based off of the position. And flowchart goes forward into other sort of situations like advantage, state, disadvantage, or whatnot, but that's how I would consider it. In terms of flowcharting for neutral, yeah, figuring out the purpose of what each neutral tool is meant to do for you is a start. So understanding what your combo starters are, what you can do to do damage safely, how you can threaten space without having to put yourself as at much risk. Those are important aspects. From there, you choose the tools, or you choose the options that you have, and try to match it to one of those functions. Match it to starting a combo, or match it to damaging safely, right? The point is that what you choose to do has to be beneficial for you. And so you could have as many different options as you want, but if they all covered the same base, like, it basically will help you to mix up your play. But if it's missing elements, it's easier to get overwhelmed if you can't find a good way to, say, keep your play safe, or otherwise, if you only do damage safely but never get a good combo starter, you might have a hard time securing stocks, right? So that's kind of the tricky spots. And you can sometimes forget the different options that you have, right? It's easy to come up with so many different options, so many different routes that you can go down and try and put pressure on. Use every move in your kit. Try to follow it up with maybe a future step. Like, for example, let's say I get in very close on an opponent and I try to land with, like, my Nair is a very good pressure tool, and if I do something like an auto cancel, I can make it like -6 myself. So basically that's pretty safe in terms of, like, frame data stuff. But after the fact, I'm probably going to be right next to the opponent. So do I spot dodge? Do I choose to dash away? Do I choose to just attack again? Right? That's a question that's tricky. But ultimately, the experience that you have, what you do in matches, how it actually plays out, is hopefully what influences what you continue to use, right? And so, like I said, the root of that is trying to figure out what it does for me, right? How does this help me in neutral? And if it serves that purpose, then you'll see if that actually gives you results, right? Gives you the outcome you're looking for. Mr. Nice, I hope that answers your question. If anybody else has questions, fire away as well. I got a hoodie on, so I'm just going to take it off. It's a little bit warm. Glad to hear it, Mr. Nice. Neutral's really complicated. We could go into very long discussion about all the different things. Let me see if I can use a different character for a quick second. I'll just see if I can provide a little bit more. I'll just use Cloud because Cloud is often a lot simpler conceptually for what he's supposed to do. So one thing that's really nice about Cloud is he's got quite a bit of disjoint to his moves, right? Basically, he's got this massive sword. And the thing is, you can obviously try and hit someone directly with these options. That's great. But sometimes it's the actual threat of the option itself that becomes very valuable, right? The most kind of direct situation where this becomes at play is at ledge or in the corner, where basically he can throw out these options and he can cover the space without having to necessarily always throw it out directly on the person. He might not necessarily have to throw out the back air either if he's at a far enough range, but he can keep the opponent within a space that's controllable for him. And so that's an example of how he might try to layer his neutral, use his tools. He's also the kind of character that doesn't get a whole lot off of a single hit per se. It can connect into combos, but he's not the combo master, right? He's the advantage master in a sense, right? If he ends up knocking someone off into the corner, well, it's going to become a lot easier for him to find ways to keep you trapped there, right? And basically just kind of rinse and repeat in a sense. And it's very difficult to contest the back air itself. But that plays more to his strengths, right? You want to play to your character's strengths, to your strengths. So, last call on questions here. Otherwise, we'll move on to ledge trapping. I'll give it just an extra minute. I think we're good, actually, based off of what I can see here. Okay. So I'm going to have to make some quick adjustments here real quick because I have a different slideshow. I do enjoy using the PowerPoints because then it feels more like learning. Press 1 if you used the power or made a PowerPoint in the last, like, I don't know, let's say 2 years. I'm not in school right now, so the last time I made a PowerPoint would have been a very long time ago by this point. If you're in school, you might still be doing it. I actually don't know if PowerPoints are common anymore. I guess they kind of are. You can do it for projects. All right. You make Word documents and files. Yeah, that's basically what I do. I write a whole lot in Word documents and a little bit on like notepads. That's about it. Yeah. PowerPoints are usually not the way to take things down. They're a good way of presenting for sure, but they're meant for presenting. Okay, so let's talk about ledge trap. PowerPoint takes 5 minutes to start up. Dang. Well, I don't think it's that hard. I think it's okay. At least mine starts up fast, but I don't know. Okay, let's talk about good old ledge trap. Your computer's a potato? Yeah, maybe. So, ledge trapping is kind of complicated. It's tricky as well for a lot of different people. And I should mention for these two different resources that I've had up to this point, there are videos of it out there on YouTube already at this point of other people's perspectives. For ledge trapping here, I will make reference to some of DeBuzz's stuff because DeBuzz actually does have some pretty good videos on it. I should probably link them in the actual chat itself. Let me see if I can do that real quick before I actually continue through, because I would like to give that sort of credit through. Generally when I present, though, it's usually my own thoughts. The debuzz stuff I definitely got a little bit of inspiration from, and it helped to put some things together for my own ledge trapping. So I want to give, want to pass that along. Oh, I just realized this is going to be a little bit trickier than I thought. Wait, okay. I'm going to pass this one over. This is one version, and this is another one. Now, they're not going to come into play right now, but I will mention when they're related. Give me a quick sec here. Okay. So, when we talk about ledge trapping, what is the goal of ledge trapping? That's kind of a tricky question, because I think this actually is where a lot of people's opinions will start to differ, is what the goal of ledge trapping is. To me, it's about keeping your opponent at ledge. And so, I mean, I think that's an agreeable enough statement, but how you accomplish that can vary. So a lot of people, how they like to view ledge trap is that when they choose the ledge option, that's what you should be punishing, right? If you miss the punish, that's the problem, in a sense, is how a lot of people will view ledge trap. The ledge timings or ledge positioning, basically all the options that they have, whether it be like neutral, get up, roll, jump, etc., they are consistent options for sure, but they have, there's basically a list of options they could choose, right? We don't know exactly which one they're going to pick yet. And the option that they pick is going to be based off of where we're positioned or what we're doing at the time. But if we don't account for it correctly, if we don't react, it's going to be hard to actually get the punish. But to me, ledge trap is more so about maintaining that situation. And you maintain that situation through your spacing, not necessarily through having to directly punish. If you could get a react punish on something like a neutral get up and get it right, that's great, because it probably gets you to set up into, let's say, knocking them off stage. And that could either reset the ledge trap or maybe take a stock if they're at high percent, right? So that's a good situation for you. But if you don't get the punish right away, then your priority should be about making sure they can't get away from this corner, right? That they stay where they are. And if you take advantage of that aspect, then they'll naturally return to a ledge trap situation, because eventually in this sort of more favorable neutral for yourself, because you have a lot more stage positioning than them, it's easier for you to pick the situations you want to play out. They don't have as much of that luxury, and I'll try and show it in game 2. But the point being that you don't have to force your hand. You're the one in control when you're ledge trapping. So that's something I think is important to keep in mind. I also think it's important to try and split ledge traps into types. And I like to do 2 types of ledge traps. So one is reactionary and the other is coverage. What do I mean by this? Let's try and get some examples. Well, actually, maybe Roy's not. I guess Roy has some degree of it, but let's take Roy for example. He's a pretty good ledge trapper. He's got lots of different options, lots of fast options that can cover different things. And if you've ever tried to get off of ledge versus a Roy, especially if you don't have great ledge play, you'll find that it's a bit of a nightmare. And part of that has to do with the fact that he's got, very fast startup on moves. He's very agile, so he can move from point A to point B as much as needed. He does what he needs to do. yeah, basically, if he sees a spot in which he wants to try and get a punish or whatnot, he can sort of react based off of, let's say, if you do a roll, if you do something like a neutral get up. So let me see if I can get the camera, just do a simple neutral get up. Might be able to do something like this, or otherwise it's more than likely going to be doing something like a jab, because the jab can connect into a whole lot more for him. So that'd be much more beneficial for him. But ultimately, that's an example of sort of more reacting. Where coverage comes into play, which Roy can also do actually, is throwing out moves. So if Roy decides to keep throwing out a move like this, well, if it's timed right, it's going to hit neutral get up anyway. It also hits stuff like jump from ledge. You could even hit the actual ledge hang itself, although for Roy's sake, it's not as good as, let's say, for like Crom. But he can threaten a lot of options just by throwing the move out, right? And other characters can do similarly, where they can sort of throw the move to threaten a potential choice of option. Sometimes things like, let's say, for example, ledge jump are pretty hard to react to. It's hard to figure out when the opponent's going to choose to do this jump, right? At least compared to something like a roll, which is quite a bit more obvious. Neutral get-up's also very important too, but that's somewhat reactable as well. And then basically attacks from ledge as well too, by dropping off of ledge and doing, like, let's say, a double jump aerial onto the stage. Can also be tricky to account for, especially when you get up close. So sometimes having an option that covers the space and basically tries to say, I'm not going to let you get there that easily, helps to make the ledge trap easier for the person. And those are the two little divisions, the two separated types, reactionary versus coverage. Reactionary being, yeah, trying to react to the actual option chosen, and coverage is picking which options you want to cover. Character can use both of them. And if you're playing a certain character, if you're trying to improve your ledge trap, try to think about which version might be more helpful for you. Can your character do both well? Is your character better at one or the other, right? That sort of thing. For ledge trap setup, you want to start getting a good idea of which positions you want to use to cover the options that the opponent has, and picking spots based off of those positions, how well they cover space, right? How the coverage works. So I find having 3 different ledge trap position spots is very helpful to start out, because oftentimes you're not going to have a character that has so strong of a ledge trap game that they can cover everything from one position. Who would be a character, for example, that could cover everything? It's usually characters that have a particular setup to it that get put through. Yeah, Me Gunner is a good example. Has stuff like, let's say, bombs. I believe there's like the grenade that works pretty well for that setup. Snake, I'd say Snake also is a good idea as well too. You got grenade, you've got up smash. Samus is a good one. Steve is a good one. Simon and Richter are pretty good ones too, I'd say. Robin's not as good at it, but Robin has arc fire and it can go right on ledge too. Basically ones that can cover ledge hang, but then also everything else too. And a lot of times these require a little bit of setup time. So if you actually end up staying on ledge for too long, or if they get all of it together before you actually have a chance to get off of ledge, it gets really hard to get past it, right? Yeah. DDD is also kind of like that too. Rosaluma. Those are all really good answers. So there are characters that can do it for sure. 100%, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that all characters can do it. And there's also some caveats on the setup portion itself as well too. Like I said, there's a degree of setup required for it to actually work properly too, right? It won't simply just be I put the opponent on ledge and now I win the game, right? There's a little bit of time to make sure that they've covered their options correctly. So I'm just going to go to Pit. Now, I play Pit, and I do think that his ledge trapping is, I would say, above average. It is pretty good. Mostly because he can do a little bit of both. He can do a little bit of both reacting and coverage. So, what positions do we have to cover here? Which ones we have to cover? We have neutral get up. We have roll. We have jump. We have like get up attack, right? We have ledge hang, where they don't move at all. And then we have basically something like a double jump forward, right? They could do like an attack out of it most of the time because most characters have to take a bit of a risk going into the stage. So they'll try to cover themselves with a move. And sometimes other characters will have extra ways of moving around after the fact. So like, let's say a ledge jump might lead into something like, let's say like a flip jump for ZSS, or maybe an afterburner kick for Bayonetta. There are a few extra options that become character specific, but those are the basic ones, right? So if I wanted to try and cover those positions, I have to understand how the positioning of where I'm choosing to cover from affects my actual ability or the practicality of punishing options. So if I'm standing here, for example, this works really good for covering roll, at least for most characters. Like if I give or take, if I position correctly against the opponent's roll, I'm going to cover it, right? It would be very easy for me to do something as simple as like a shield grab or like an F smash on somebody rolling right to my position. However, it's not the greatest at covering some of the other positions. If someone does like a neutral get up, let's say for example, I knock Ganondorf off to the side, reacting to a neutral get up from that position is going to be actually a lot harder, just because I can't really, I'll have to figure out what their timing is, and I only have a limited window to cross this gap, right? I'm not already there. If I'm already there, for example, maybe this is going to work a lot better for doing something like covering a neutral get up, right? Because I can see it all happening, and I don't have to shift, right? So this works pretty well for covering roll. In a sense, where this also helps is for covering things like an aggressive option from ledge. It's a lot harder for someone to hit you if you're this far in stage, right? Yes, if I'm sitting over here, this is going to work great for covering neutral get up, but if someone chooses an aggressive option from ledge, there's a good chance I'm going to get hit by accident, right? I might not be ready for it. Or if I choose an option and it doesn't hit anything, I might have to shield preemptively, right? That sort of thing. If I'm chilling here with roll as well too, it'll be harder for me to cover ledge jump options, but I do have the added benefit that I'm already a little bit more in stage. So if they choose to ledge jump, I'll have an easier time covering any really hard attempt to try and get in stage. They have to go through me first. They have to go above me first. So chances are they're probably going to land in a space in front of me, right? So this is an example of one position that might be helpful. And so I think if you want to really get your ledge trap strong, you want to try and develop 3 different positions. That just will hopefully help you to spread out all of those different coverages. And I find that sometimes also, despite your best efforts, some players or some characters are very good at getting around what your go-to strategy is for ledge trap, right? If my go-to is to just cover, let's say, like neutral get up position, but they have all these different other options that are really hard to account for, I would like to have backups if I can. That's at least how I work. And so I think it's a little bit handy to consider how else you can ledge trap. But no need to get too complicated. I think my go-tos for the most part, I generally do chill in this area, for example. I can throw out hitboxes as well to cover jump with something like a nair. I can hop backwards and basically throw things like back air here. So if I throw like a coverage option like this, it's quite easy for me to space it. There are some downsides, actually, I should mention. So I briefly mentioned earlier that for ledge trap types, I like to split them into reactionary versus coverage. There are some cons to both of them. So for reactionary coverage, the downside is it's very much dependent on your execution, right? If you don't react correctly, you probably missed the opportunity, right? They probably got on stage. So it asks a lot out of yourself, right? For coverage, let's say, for example, I'm just deciding to do Nair over and over again in the same spot like this. An opponent can see that coming, perhaps, and just think, all right, well, if that's all they're going to do, let's say, for example, if I'm worried that they're actually going to start drifting or something, if I can figure out where they're landing, I might be able to interrupt that, right? Or find a gap in the coverage, right? So I might be able to get up attack this Nair. I might be able to roll past it if they just stay where they are. Lots of different things. And so coverage is very nice because you don't have to think as much about what you're doing. You just have to think about what you're covering. But it has its flaws as well. Yo, Aiden, welcome. And also, I saw you typing earlier, Zangrix, but welcome as well. So those are a few different kind of cons that I thought I'd mention as well, too, because it's a back and forth game. It's tricky to keep everything in account. This is something that you will hear from other Smash tubers as well, people who play the game competitively and offer advice for ledge trapping. They'll often say to try and make sure that you don't keep the person comfortable at ledge. So again, I'll give some reference back to Debuzz because one of his videos is about Toon Link trying to ledge trap. I forget the character. I think it was Marth. But basically, the issue at the time was basically not being able to threaten ledge. The positioning that the Toon Link had chosen wasn't really covering very much, right? And so why do we want to cover ledge? Or why do we want to at least threaten it? It has to do with the fact that it affects ledge timing. So when we try to react to options or when we try to cover options, the one huge mix-up that the opponent has is their ledge timing. They can change when they choose their option, right? So when they grab ledge, they can choose to just press it right away, right? They could delay for quite a while. They could pick somewhere in between the range that I just did there, right? They could wait really, really long time, right? You don't fall for a decent while off of the ledge. If you do fall, then it's a bad thing because you'll re-grab, but like most likely. But the timing is very difficult to manage as someone who's doing the ledge trapping. So if you can threaten at the very least that when someone's invincibility is going to wear out, let me see if I can show this in the game. So blue is invincibility. When this timing wears out, you want the opponent to be thinking that by, let's see, this point, that they've already had to choose an option, right? That would be nice. And the only way that you're really going to get that to happen is you have to threaten it to some degree. Doesn't necessarily mean you always have to be chilling there and put in a position. Like, so for example, if I'm chilling here, Pit has down smash that hits below ledge. If I'm chilling at neutral get up position, I can easily threaten that. And it's possible. Sup, Chips? Welcome, welcome. If your character is not very good at hitting ledge, because there's lots of characters that are not great at doing it, then it depends a little bit on whether or not, one, you can hit ledge. So if you can't hit ledge at all, then the only other thing you really have available is something like a ledge trump, right? You could do something like a ledge trump. But even if you can just poke it, a lot of times people don't realize how ineffective your option actually is going to be. They're just going to feel the pressure from getting punished, right? So if you can influence their ledge timing in any way to make it more consistent and a tighter window so that there's not as much mix-up, you will make your ledge trapping life way easier. That's my advice. So, yeah. I guess I have it here as a slide as well, but I'll put it up front here just so that it's put through. So, make the opponent's timing consistent. Make it so they can't just simply hold ledge. A tricky spot is definitely trying to figure out what option they'll choose. And some characters have some very strong ledge options. And you have to consider what the effective range of those options is, because you can probably contour your ledge trap around those options. You can make it so that they're out of range, or make it so that you're out of range of the particular options. So I'll actually show this in terms of a specific example. Which is Bayonetta. So if you've ever played against a Bayonetta before, like if you have a local Bayonetta, for example, one thing that you probably have seen before is ledge jump side B. This is like a classic. And it's difficult to punish, right? It's tricky, right? Because it's very fast, and it actually offers quite a bit for the Bayonetta, right? Because basically if they get this hit, they might even be able to combo or whatnot. Like they might even be able to get a combo after, right? So it's, why not go for it, right? Potentially could be very helpful for you in addition to getting off of ledge. I don't play Bayo, so I apologize for not being able to combo off of it, but I swear it's possible. But yeah, so it has an effective range. However, there's kind of a downside to it in the sense where a lot of Bayo players will just sort of autopilot it. They'll just start doing it, right? And it is a very strong option, even if someone tries to shield it, per se. But if I wanted to really sort of counter this option specifically, what I might do, and what I started to do a little bit more, is I would basically try and figure out where's the limit, right? Where would this start to miss? So if I'm outside of range, that's still too close, per se. If I wanted to stay outside of range, I could chill from this position here, right? And basically, no matter what they try, it's not going to hit me. If I wanted to be a little bit more kind of smart about it, a lot of times you can also use your crouch to go underneath it. So I often use crouch, and I basically get to like a position on the left side of this platform, like underneath. And I'll usually crouch like that, and I'll be able to duck it. But ultimately, if you nullify this option's effectiveness, right? Because if I decide as Bayonetta here, if I decide I'm going to do an ABK, if I miss, this is where I end up, which is very easy to punish, right? And if the ledge trapper who's ledge trapping me punishes this consistently every time I do it, then I'm probably going to start thinking I shouldn't be going for this option anymore, right? And this can help you in starting to set up actual legitimate ledge traps against certain characters. So, for example, if you have a hard time starting a ledge trap against Bayo because of this option, if you can rule it out by respecting it and giving it the proper sort of punish that it needs, then now they have to choose from the remaining options, right? Neutral get up, roll, jump, or whatnot. You at least have a start to something that you can actually use. And so that's sometimes what you have to do for certain characters. Pikachu has quick attack, which is also really tricky to handle. Flip jump is like that too with ZSS. Give it some good situation, or give it some good respect. Okay, let's see. Good tip also is that if you have a good out of shield, like Roy's, for example, you can stand on the... Okay. You can stand on the middle of ABK range and bear out of shield. Exactly, right? So, like, you can do out of shield punishes as well, too. But it'll be a little more conscious of a setup. But if you do that, then, yeah, you can really discourage them from wanting to do these options. And that again makes the ledge trap a whole lot easier. So I would recommend it. That's a good example, though. I appreciate it, Zangrix. And as a closing thought, I'll just show it one time here because I didn't really highlight it that well at the time originally. I sort of mentioned it verbally. I basically said you lose the ledge trap once you lose the positioning, right? Once I commit to something and I throw myself so much out of position that it's very easy for me to get whiff punished in reverse, or otherwise they can just take center stage, that's when I really lose the ledge trap, right? So if they choose an option and I don't feel comfortable, I don't necessarily have to commit to something, because at this point here, Robin's quite limited. Running off stage is not really going to do too much for Robin at this point. Like, yes, they could, say, run off and do like a back air off of the ledge with like a double jump, right? That's definitely possible. But ultimately, it's a little bit risky and it corners themselves even more, right? So ideally what they would rather try and do is find a way out through some manner. But the issue with it is I can control this horizontal spacing very well. I have plenty of stage to give up here. And if they decide to come in from above, they're going to have to pass over me, right? So not an ideal situation at all, right? So as Pit, what reason do I have to force anything, right? I shouldn't have to force anything, actually. I should pick spots when I think that it's going to work out, right? I could even just sort of threaten the space to say, oh, it looks like I'm going to go in on you, but not actually, and try and get some sort of reaction out of the opponent so that I can whiff punish, right? That would be very easy to do as well, too. But I have lots of space that I can technically give up, as long as the end result is not that we return to neutral, right? If I can find some way to knock them back off again, then it's going to help quite a bit in continuing this ledge trap. I don't necessarily have to just punish directly, right? It can be very risky, especially if I miss it. But as a punish, like being able to punish directly, yes, it's the most direct version. If you have that unlocked, that's really awesome, but it is not the end-all be-all of ledge trapping. That's at least something I hope is a takeaway. So that is basically it for today. Do we have any questions on ledge trap? Any thoughts? Hopefully I explained it all right. I know that I don't really do I haven't done it before here on YouTube, but I appreciate for everybody who showed up here as well. I'm hoping to do more of these. I'm planning on also announcing these. So if you are a sub already right now, I'd like to probably make these community posts so that folks have an idea that this is happening ahead of time. But I just kind of made it last minute on this one. So your questions got answered, Subi. Glad to hear it. And basically, the gist is these become my videos later. So if you want to be a part of the process here, and basically, for example, if you want to have questions that you have about these topics answered, this is the best time to do it, because they basically, it's a good way to interact with the content and to learn about it. And oftentimes the questions that you have are questions that other people have too. A lot of people think in similar ways or have similar hurdles, right? So it's my hope that it basically helps to enrich the content too, make it more helpful for people. Looks like we might be good here. Oh, tips on getting better. Oh gosh, wait, hold on a minute. Tips on getting better at reacting to rolls. Is it similar to neutral getup? And no worries, Subi. This info is, I'm more than happy to give it out. For rolls, I mean, I would say generally rolls, in theory, should be one of the easiest ones to react to. I think what's tricky about it is that it's often been one of the more obvious options for a lot of players, right? Because basically it puts you so far in stage that it becomes kind of ironed out of us to not do it as much, and so then it becomes less frequent of an option. The most important part, I think, for rolls is understanding where they're going to roll to. And this depends on the character, because a character that has a short roll, I think Pitts is on the longer side, but some characters might roll from ledge and they'll wind up here, for example. Or some characters have very long rolls and they'll wind up over here. Depending on how I position myself, this could be the difference between someone winding up in front of me and behind me, right? So I play Wii Fit Trainer as well. That's my second main. And she has the, I think, second longest roll. So I often take advantage of that because I try to take advantage of someone's setup position. Basically making sure that they aren't just simply rolling into the proper spot. Or basically like so that they aren't just waiting for me to do the roll. And if I think that I've actually got them in a position where I'm going to roll behind them, I might just do that because they're not ready for it. But oftentimes you can start from somewhere else and still be able to react to roll in some manner. I would say probably if you find that you're struggling to react to it, it might require a little bit more consideration of how effective your coverage of the other options is, right? Is there a reason that the person has chosen to roll? Is it because it feels like everything else isn't going to work, if that makes sense? And if so, that's a really good thing because then it makes it feel like they have to choose a roll. And if you know that, then you can take advantage of it. But it also means that you may not necessarily need to go full tilt with your ledge trap, right? If you've already accomplished the task of covering everything else, you can wait to see if they're going to do something like a roll or whatnot, right? Or otherwise, if you choose an option but then back off, maybe you might be able to force other sort of situations. What's tricky about it is we always feel like we want to be doing things, and we definitely do, but the more that we can accomplish things without throwing out moves, the easier it is to start reacting to things. I actually should mention one more thing, now that I think about it. I linked 2 DeBuzz videos earlier. The second video that he has, which actually, this is the video that I found was very helpful for my own ledge trapping, is he has a concept called ledge trap flow. And the idea is that once you have good mastery of these different ledge trap positions, I think what's important is also being able to swap between them. Because where you're positioned indicates what you're trying to cover. If I'm chilling over here, I think it's quite obvious that I'm going to try and cover neutral getup, right? And so if someone is deciding ledge options, they're actively challenging me by choosing neutral getup here, right? So their chances of doing it is going to be lower than if I was positioned somewhere else, right? But at the same time, if I keep myself in a position that's very free form and ready to move to the different areas, so for example, maybe I move backwards, but I'm ready to move back to neutral getup position, I might be able to bait them into thinking, no, I'm not actually going to be there. You can choose that option. It's okay. And then kind of pull an Uno reverse on them, right? Like I said, the different positionings themselves are quite valuable in that you may find yourself having an easier time pulling off a ledge trap versus a certain player from a position, right? It's better to have more than just a single option for your ledge trap, and that makes or breaks whether or not it works. So I think it's important to try and develop at least 3 different positions and keep in mind what they cover. Okay. I think that basically is it. We basically covered everything for now. there's definitely a lot more we could go into. But hopefully it was entertaining for everybody. And no, thank you as well, Zangrix. I appreciate the questions as well, because they help to, again, flesh out the concept more than just a simple presentation. My 3 positions for pit, one of them is here. One of them is here. I think sometimes I basically will do back air in place like this. So I guess this is another one, for example. I could do one, like, for example, from this position as well, too, and have it so that I can drop through with a back air on reaction or down air. But generally what I use for the most part is this position, and then something like this. And basically I can swap between them quite easily because they're all in a similar position, like space of stage. As I wind up for something like a back air, it's quite easy for me to end up dashing back to get ready for the roll, or to turn around for a grab, right? Or I can go backwards with my back air to begin with and put myself in that position, right? If I do an air here, I can potentially go back and whatnot. Lots. Yeah, Zachary's very good with pit. Zachary knows what he's doing. I'm planning on trying to do another VOD review of his most recent sets at some point. I'm trying to do more of the Smash studying and stuff on YouTube, because a lot of people have really liked the YouTube videos, and I think this is the better place to put it than on Twitch, for example. So I will try to do it some more. I will try and give some heads up, though, so it's not out of the blue. So I apologize if anyone sees this after the fact and is like, why didn't he say anything? I'm sorry. All right. We'll wrap it up at this today then. But appreciate it for everybody watching. And yeah, stay tuned. I will be putting out some more Smash content soon. Just give me... It'll be out when the next upload is coming out, which should be the 27th of May. So stay tuned. But I will see you folks later. So take care.